Welcome back to the Relationship-Based Care Practice series. Today's topic is primary caregiving. I'm Tina Jimenez with the Infant Toddler Specialist Network. We develop systems and support individuals working within states, territories, and tribes to enhance the quality of infant toddler care in early education settings. I'd like to invite my co-presenters to say hello.
Welcome, I'm Julie Law. I'm excited to be here today with you to explore primary caregiving.
Hello everyone, I'm Rana Schaefer and I'm glad to be back here with you.
So in staying true to our tradition, we'd like to invite you to get comfortable as you prepare to explore primary caregiving. This series was designed to increase your understanding of how the PIDC relationship-based care practices, the pyramid model, and the third edition of the environment rating scales can work together to support and measure high-quality care for infants and toddlers. As a reminder, the PIDC's 6 essential program practices work together to set the stage for positive relationships between infants and caregivers in group settings. Today, you'll learn why primary caregiving is an essential component of high-quality infant-toddler care. Here are the goals for today's webinar. You'll deepen your understanding of why primary caregiving is important. You'll receive strategies for helping child care programs implement primary caregiving. And you'll explore the connection between primary caregiving, the pyramid model, and the environment rating scales. As with previous webinars, please allow 1 hour to view the webinar and complete the accompanying learning experiences. For this session, you'll need to download 3 items: the primary caregiving worksheet, the primary caregiving rationale paper, and the PowerPoint for this webinar. You'll also need to have your ITERS 3 or your FECRS 3 assessment booklets available. As with previous webinars, when you click on the handout icon at the bottom of the screen, you'll find links to additional resources that can be used to deepen your understanding of the webinar content. Please pause the recording to gather your materials, then resume the webinar when you're ready. Welcome back. Now that you have your materials, let's begin with a reflection. What comes to mind when you think about primary caregiving for yourself as an adult? You might think about your experiences with your primary health providers or your experience with a cherished service provider, such as your hairstylist. Reflect on your feelings about these people and consider how you might feel if they were no longer in your life. Then think about primary caregiving for infants and toddlers in childcare settings. What comes to mind when you think about this? Continue to reflect on this, then pause the webinar to complete the learning experience for slide 6. Resume the webinar when you're ready. Thank you for taking time to reflect on your adult experience with primary caregiving. Perhaps like me, you thought about a favorite doctor. I recall the feeling that I had when my insurance changed and I had to find a new doctor. I still remember how difficult it was to try to find a doctor who would take the time needed to get to know me. I remember feeling worried that someone new just wouldn't understand my history or my unique needs. When I did find a new doctor, I recall feeling frustrated by having to explain my medical history from the beginning in the hope that this new doctor would understand my needs. And I really missed the comfort level that I felt with my previous doctor. You know, as you support caregivers, it can be helpful to have them think about primary caregiving from their own experience as an adult. Taking time for this conversation can set the stage for empathetic understanding about why primary caregiving is important for infants and toddlers. As you thought about primary caregiving for infants and toddlers, you might have thought about the security and comfort that children feel when they have someone special in their lives that they can trust and rely upon. Sometimes when caregivers hear that term primary caregiving, they associate it with exclusive care. They may hold beliefs or values that oppose implementing primary caregiving in their program. You can help to ease their anxiety by ensuring that caregivers understand the practice of primary caregiving and the benefits this practice provides to caregivers, children, and families. Now I'll turn it over to Julie to talk more about this.
Thank you, Tina, for helping us reflect on the importance of primary caregiving. In primary caregiving, we are focusing on a meaningful relationship an infant or toddler has with an adult caregiver, where the care of each child is assigned to one specific teacher or family child care provider, who is principally responsible for that child and communicating with the child's family. Primary caregiving may occur naturally in family child care and home care settings, given the presence of one adult with smaller group size and natural load ratios. Primary caregivers develop a relationship with the child and his or her family. They observe and document each child's development and anticipate how they might support them as they grow and learn. Primary caregivers carry out personal care routines such as diapering, nap and mealtime, as well as transition times at parent drop-off and pickup. They provide continuous emotional support and are available throughout the day to meet both the physical and social needs of each infant or toddler in their care. Primary caregiving is not meant to be interpreted as exclusive care. Primary caregiving relationships are respected by child care program staff and understood as the person who has primary responsibility for each child during transitions, care routines, and when emotional or relational support is needed. As you may have noted in your reflection, a consistent primary caregiver provides several benefits. Trust is the most important characteristic of the primary caregiving relationship. The richness of responsive interaction builds meaningful connections and strong relationships. Infants and toddlers develop their sense of who they are within these relationships. When a young child's primary caregiver connects with their family and provides similar care during routines, a direct connection is created back to the child's culture and experiences at home. Another significant benefit of a consistent, trusting relationship with a responsive caregiver is that it helps to buffer infants and toddlers from stress and disruptions in the environment. When infants and toddlers experience healthy, responsive relationships with their primary caregiver, they are learning how to be in relationship with others. Even at this very young age, the baby is receiving signals of what trust feels like and what it means to be safe and secure. Through positive verbal and physical interactions, new brain connections are formed and modified. The predictable and consistent experiences day after day with an adult caregiver wire the infant's brain to form a picture of what healthy relationships look like, to expect the same from future relationships. As you see here, the pyramid model focuses our attention to the essential ingredients needed for healthy brain development. It is clear that having one primary caregiver in the child care setting who really concentrates their care on a few specific children can allow for these to be met. The primary caregiver is supported by secondary caregivers who care for the children when they are absent. They work together to develop healthy relationships, offer individualized positive experiences, and create a safe environment for each child. The pyramid model, and research in many models as well, shows us that when we work to understand what children are trying to communicate to us through their behavior, we are better able to support their ability to engage in positive behavior. One way to be able to really tune in and understand what each child is communicating is through primary caregiving. Repeated interactions allow primary caregivers to better understand a child's mood, read cues for hunger, tiredness, as well as signs of frustration. Understanding the ways a child communicates helps the primary caregiver anticipate the support the infant or toddler may need. When thinking about a child's behavior as their way of communicating, we understand how essential it is to get to know the meaning of their behavior. This opens us up to being curious to understand what the behaviors a child expresses mean. A primary caregiver has the benefit of being able to get to know a small group of children and their families. They quickly know and can interpret the meaning of a smile, or that 2 arms stretched up may mean to pick me up, or pointing toward a bottle may mean I am hungry or want more. Being observant and attentive helps caregivers learn more about the meaning of an infant or toddler's behavior. Now we are going to watch a video of a primary caregiver. Before you start the video, have your worksheet open to the video reflection for slide 13. While you watch the video, notice how the caregiver engages with the baby, and take note of how primary caregiving is supporting this infant and her family. After the video, pause the webinar and write down your reflections on the worksheet.
Do you have a nose? Can you say? Can you make that noise? A giraffe? No. A zebra? Is there a zebra? Thank you for helping me. Thank you. You're a great helper. You're a great helper.
He looked up and he saw a big fluffy bear sitting on the branches in the tree above his head. Well, nobody makes cookies like Grandma, said Mama. And then what happened?
Mama. Say hi. And
What's your nap?
both of these babies have been taking a sweet nap. Huh. Because we're sweet babies.
Hi, Jason.
Say hi, Linda. I think she does. She goes, I like my bottle, but I don't like it as much as I like my mama. Do you want to see?
Oh, she has bedhead.
She's been napping in a crib she's been doing so good.
Hi.
Say hi.
Hi, Jason. No, see?
She goes, you guys are having a party. I want to be a part of it. Huh.
Oh, I'm not leaving.
Oh.
I was just letting you stand up and say hello.
No, not what I want yet. She wants her mama, huh? Yeah. He goes, I like it when my mom comes too. What is all that?
She sees Tom out there.
She goes, I like that guy. I was having him hold her more and more because I'll be gone those 2 days. I want her to be very comfortable.
Oh, that's right for your training.
Yeah,
She'll be just fine.
she will. Lisa will be here too.
Oh, she likes her. She told
Yeah.
me.
Oh, yeah. And Lisa loves her. I always have to go, Lisa, we have 11 other children.
Oh.
But that's good. It's good when somebody snuggles you up.
Well, we will see you in the morning.
I'll see you in the morning, pretty girls. Okay, thank you.
Trying to be better.
You're getting great. What do you see?
You know, one of the days when you have your training, if it's easier, I am sure that actually, even that Wednesday, Lucy could come to work with me.
It's totally up to you. So, but know that there are people here for you if you need them, and if it, whatever you feel comfortable with.
Okay.
Okay.
Play it by ear.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye, girls. Bye, Luz.
Tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. You say bye-bye, Jace?
You may have noticed how the family child care provider engages in one-on-one care routines and helps to build communication skills with the infant during the diapering routine. Perhaps you noticed how she listened to the mom's ideas and reflected the possible meaning behind the infant's behavior. For example, I like bottle, but I don't like it as much as my mama. There are so many things that a primary caregiver can do to support healthy relationships with infants and their families. As seen in the video, when primary caregivers engage in interactions that are responsive, prompt, consistent, and meaningful, they promote the possibility of babies developing secure attachment relationships with them. As we learned in an earlier webinar, secure attachment is critical for healthy relationships and optimal development of infants and toddlers. As professionals working to support infant-toddler caregivers and programs implementing primary caregiving, It is important to remember that assigning primary caregivers is the first step. Having consistently responsive and engaging adult-child interactions is the practice of high-quality primary caregiving. Respectful and responsive caregiving is part of each of the 6 program practices within the PITC relationship-based care framework. Now we will explore ways of building primary caregiving into practice. Rana?
Thank you, Julie. When we consider implementation of primary caregiving, we need to think of it on 2 levels, at the program level and in the classroom. For family childcare, if it's a small family childcare, primary care is inherent. However, it's important for large family childcare to consider ways to practice primary caregiving with an assistant. Let's start with a bit about the program level, always remembering that effective implementation of all relationship-based practices requires leadership support. The most important part of programmatic support comes from preparation of staff. To effectively implement primary caregiving, staff needs professional development to understand not only the benefits to children, caregivers, and families, but exactly what primary caregiving is and what it is not. As you heard both Tina and Julie mention, primary caregiving does not mean exclusive care, where only one caregiver interacts with the child. Rather, it is where one caregiver is primarily responsible for routines, communication, and truly understanding the child and family. In just a few minutes, we'll delve a bit more deeply into the responsibilities and competencies required. Staff also need coaching and modeling to strengthen their skills, as well as opportunities to meet together to express their concerns or confusion about the practice. At the program level, it's also important to include information about primary caregiving in all policies, job descriptions, and family handbooks. Assigning primary caregivers takes thoughtful consideration. Ideally, we try to consider each child's individual temperament, tendencies, development, and family's values and language. We also strive to match staff schedules and respond to preferences of adults and child. However, we understand that the reality may dictate that a new child is assigned to the caregiver with an open slot. However the decision is made, we always need to maintain consistency with other relationship-based practices. The implementation of primary caregiving can be a gradual process. Each step towards primary caregiving can be celebrated. Now let's move to strategies for implementation in the classroom or large family childcare home. When considering implementing or strengthening a system of primary care, programs need to look at the key responsibilities of primary caregiving. As a primary caregiver, it is essential that we take the time to really get to know each child and their family values and expectations. This allows us to really understand and accept each child. When we do that, we can tune in and plan appropriately. It is the primary caregiver who carries out most of a child's personal care, observes, documents, and plans for experiences that meet the child's individual needs. The primary caregiver supports the child and family through transitions and works together with other staff to ensure consistency. Are there any responsibilities listed here that might cause confusion for caregivers? Now it's time for a learning experience. Please take out your worksheet. Pause the webinar and complete the assignment for slide 20. What are your thoughts about what competencies, defined as what a professional needs to know and be able to do, and what dispositions, which are a person's inherent qualities of mind and character, are needed to be an effective primary caregiver? When you're done, return to the webinar. Now that you've given some thought to the competencies and dispositions needed, let's be sure we all understand what strategies a primary caregiver can use to support social and emotional development. We know that all caregivers working with infants and toddlers need to have an understanding of social emotional development so they're able to accept all children's feelings, help them identify these feelings using emotional literacy, the strategies that we discussed in the session on social emotional development, and have appropriate expectations for children. Caregivers use these strategies with children assigned to their primary care group. They also need to be reflective and to receive support in order to implement these strategies. The next few slides provide additional caregiving strategies that support social and emotional health. As we discuss each strategy, think about how you can support and strengthen the competencies of caregivers so they're able to implement these strategies. We also know that in order to provide high-quality relationship-based care, caregivers need to continuously work to develop strong relationships with each child in order to understand them and meet their individual need, to be able to support them during times when they're having difficulty with self-regulation, and to be able to set limits and guide their behavior as is appropriate for each child. Implementation of a primary caregiving system supports this level of individualized care. As we discussed these strategies, were you able to identify some supports that might be needed for caregivers to practice these strategies? Another important aspect of primary caregiving is the relationship and partnerships we build with families. Our responsibilities as a primary caregiver is not only about supporting the child, but partnering with families through regular daily communication, like developing welcoming rituals at drop-off times, and encouraging engagement as appropriate for both the child and the family. Although several programs may already implement practices that support and engage families, consider how they might be enhanced to support quality relationships within a primary care context. Now I'll turn it back to Tina to share how the environment rating scales can be used to support and measure primary caregiving practices.
Thank you, Rana. In this section, we'll look at some of the items and indicators in the ITERS 3 and the FECRS 3 that support primary caregiving. I'll remind you that this section is not intended to serve as a training on scoring the rating scales. Our intention is to show how the environment rating scales can support the relationship-based care and the pyramid model frameworks. In the first webinar, we provided information on how caregivers can use mealtime to support relationship-based care. Today, we'd like to ask you to think about how meals and snacks relates to primary caregiving. At level 7, caregivers are required to pay close attention to children who are eating and to personalize their interactions with each child. I'll share a few examples of how this item relates to primary caregiving. Recall that primary caregivers are responsible for carrying out the majority of routines with the small group of children that have been assigned to their primary group. This means that they assume the responsibility of feeding the infants in their primary group or of sitting at the table with toddlers during mealtime. The relationship that the primary caregiver has with the children in his or her group makes it easier to individualize care, to ensure that it meets each child's unique needs during mealtime. As an example, think about a primary caregiver holding a young infant on her lap while bottle feeding. Throughout this experience, the caregiver initiates social interaction and responds to the infant's communication. She makes eye contact and snuggles with the infant. She responds to his smiles and to his coos. However, because the caregiver knows the infant well, she's able to recognize when the infant has lost interest in this engagement. Therefore, the caregiver is able to adapt the feeding experience and follow the infant's lead. Here's another example. As a primary caregiver sits with her group of toddlers during lunch, she engages in social talk with children. She talks about what they like to eat at home and comments on what they accomplished earlier in the day. The relationship that the primary caregiver has with her children and her children's families allows the caregiver to better understand the children in her group and to individualize the conversations that happen during meal times. Let's look at another example. This slide might also look familiar. In our previous webinar, we discussed how this item relates to individualized care. Now let's think about how diapering and toileting relate to primary care. This is important because the idea of one caregiver changing several children, one after another, appeals to no one, neither the child nor the caregiver. Think back to the reflection at the beginning of this webinar. You were asked to reflect on your adult experience with a primary caregiver. Recall that most of us trust and feel more secure with a responsive, familiar caregiver. This is true for infants and toddlers too. Children feel more comfortable when they know what to expect during diapering or during the toileting process. They benefit from the consistency that comes from primary caregiving. Outside of a child's family, the primary caregiver knows a child best. This allows the caregiver to better understand a child's abilities, to understand his likes and his dislikes, and to understand his diapering or toileting preferences. The primary caregiver is also in the unique position to partner with the child's family to co-create toilet learning goals and to incorporate the family's goals around diapering or toileting into practice. Primary caregiving supports trust, cultural continuity, and individualized caregiving. This next item, health practices, is also from the personal care routine subscale. In item 7, health practices, indicator 5.4 requires that the nap schedule be flexible and individualized to meet the needs of infants and toddlers. Children differ in how they like to fall asleep. For example, one child might like his caregiver to sit near his cot and read him a special book to help him fall asleep, while another child might like the caregiver to gently rub his back while he dozes off. Some children may want their caregiver to sing them a familiar lullaby, maybe the same lullaby that their grandmother sings them at home. Yet some children like to be rocked to sleep, while others prefer to fall asleep on their own. Some infants like to be swaddled, while others do not. Primary caregiving supports children's rest because primary caregivers are better able to recognize and respond to children's cues and individual needs. This example is from the Language and Books subscale, item 12, encouraging children to communicate. Indicator 5.2 requires that caregivers personalize their questions and conversations for individual children. Examples that demonstrate this can be found in your environmental rating scale booklets. They include talking about children's interests, their families, their preferences, and their moods. To be able to do this, the caregiver must know a child well. The deep knowledge that a caregiver has about each child in their primary group allows for personalized conversations. The final example I'll share with you today is from the interaction subscale. ITERS 3, item 28, staff-provider interactions, and FECRS 3, item 27, provider-child interactions. Indicator 5.3 requires caregivers to be understanding, soothing, and supportive of children who might be anxious, angry, afraid, or hurt. Think about what you need when you feel afraid, angry, or hurt. Wouldn't you want to be able to turn to someone that you could count on to support your feelings and your strong emotions? Someone who would understand exactly what you need at that moment. Someone you trust and you depend on. Indicator 7.2 requires caregivers to be sensitive to a child's nonverbal cues and to respond appropriately. This includes that caregivers notice when children are distressed, sad, or angry, and respond by offering appropriate support. As we've mentioned frequently in this webinar, because of the deep relationship that a primary caregiver has with the children in his or her group, the caregiver is better able to understand the children's needs and to provide children with appropriate support. Now it's time to reflect on what you've learned and to complete the final learning experience. Please reflect on why primary caregiving is important for infants, toddlers, and their families. Identify 2 strategies that you'll use with caregivers. Consider how the pyramid model supports primary caregiving. And think about how the ITERS 3 or the FECRS 3 might be used to help infant toddler caregivers understand primary caregiving. Pause the video to complete the learning experience for slide 31. Take as much time as you need for this, and then return to the webinar for our wrap-up. Congratulations! You've completed the 4th webinar in the Relationship-Based Care Practice series. We hope that this webinar has provided you with a deeper understanding of primary caregiving. Thank you for joining us today and for all the work that you do to support our infant and toddler caregivers. We look forward to your continued participation in this webinar series. We'll see you next time. Bye.